Chapter 10. Josiah. The luxury suite was both a beautiful vacation spot and a glorified prison. 2 weeks had gone by with virus cases steadily on the rise. The death toll had been the highest so far a few days prior, and while Josiah put on a happy face for his followers, when the camera was off, he couldn't find the energy for anything beyond lying supine across his mattress, legs and arms dangling off the sides. He took in a deep breath and exhaled it out as the red-numbered digital clock flashed the hour. It was 8 in the morning on a routine Tuesday, after a routine Monday. Ray woke at 6 o'clock in the morning on the weekdays, and he worked out and showered before settling in his makeshift office at the kitchen table. Most mornings, Josiah pretended to be asleep as Ray tiptoed into the bedroom, snuck into the shower, and then tiptoed back out with a towel around his bottom half. He left wet footprints on the white hardwood flooring, tracks for when Josiah finally cracked his eyes open and slipped out of the bed. Josiah showered some time after 8 o'clock. At the beginning of the lockdown, he showered earlier, but as the time wore on, the need for a schedule disappeared, and he showered later and later each day. Some days he skipped, but even when he did shower, he ended up back dressed in a baggy sweater and loose-fitting lounge clothes. His deliveries had been drastically delayed, which meant he had nothing to show his followers but his life in his gilded cage, and there was no point in showing how opulent and privileged his locked-down life was. Who was he to complain when his money flowed steadily, and he had all of his meals delivered by others in not as comfortable situations? He woke late and slept early, checked the news when he felt like hearing the subtle panic in the reporter's tone, but he was detached from the true horrors of the virus, and he would always be. He curled his fingers as they grew heavy from pooled blood, and finally pushed himself upright, combing his fingers through his growing afro. He liked his hair short, but it had been 3 weeks in lockdown so far and 5 weeks since his last haircut. It was starting to show, but he brushed and slicked his hair down as best he could. He bent his body forward, fitting his torso between his folded legs and stretching the vertebrae of his spinal cord, releasing the tension from sleeping, and as he crawled out of bed, Ray knocked on the door. "Your packages are here." People are saying it's best to let mail sit for 2 to 3 days before touching it though, so I had the delivery guy put your boxes in the corner of the living room. "Okay," Josiah drawled, rubbing his hands down his face and collapsing into bed again. There was no point in showering now. The worst part about the lockdown was the newly available mental capacity for things beyond living life. Of course, Josiah's life was hardly stressful, but without parties, clubs, or other social events, he had more time to think, and he readily avoided thinking. He normally busied himself with so many other things that he was too tired to think at the end of the night, but now he had nothing else to do. He thought about his life growing up, being the best at being the best in hopes of catching his father's attention. It didn't work. Memories of his relationship with Quentin bubbled into his mind. He remembered the highlights and the way Quentin turned him to putty, but he also remembered the fights, the anger, and the sadness. He remembered the nights he fell asleep in an empty bed, tears blotting his face and his own arms wrapped around him. Self-soothing, they called it. He remembered from life sciences, from many different sources. He also remembered the day of the breakup, the day his life crumbled into 1,000 little wispy pieces, and the days after where he tried to put himself back together. Then he remembered some of his drunken tryst with Ray. He remembered the kiss. Even through a drunken stupor, he knew there was something between them, something more than familial hatred in the atmosphere, but he didn't want to admit it. He wasn't ready to sleep with Ray. He wanted to, but he wasn't ready, but he also wasn't sure if he wanted to because of the circumstances, because his childhood fantasy could come true, or because for the last 3 weeks, Ray had been the most accommodating, patient, and encouraging man he had ever met. Quentin had never been encouraging. In fact, despite the reality of Josiah's job paying all of their bills and affording them a lovely apartment in a historic building in downtown Austin, he didn't even consider being a social media influencer a job, and he was never interested in being in any of Josiah's videos. After another few hours, Ray knocked on his door again, calling him for a quiet dinner where they sat across from each other. Sometimes they spoke, but most of the time Josiah picked at his food before returning to his bedroom and crawling back under the sheets. For the rest of the evening, he laid stretched across the bed, dipping in and out of sleep until the next morning, where he repeated the day before and retreated to his room again. The third day, he woke and stared at the ceiling as Ray showered. He could open his packages, so there was one reason to get out of bed. The second reason strolled out in a towel and braided his wet hair. Or perhaps Ray was a reason to stay in bed. Ray peeked into Josiah's drawers, again pulling out the largest of his lounge clothes. After he tugged one of Josiah's workout shirts over his head, he glanced at him in the mirror, dark eyes gazing into Josiah's through the reflection. "How are you feeling today?" Ray asked, dropping the towel and digging through the drawers again. The playboy was proud of his naked body, of course, and why shouldn't he be? He was the one still following various workout challenges, while Josiah's challenge had become eating more than a few bites of any given meal. Ray was more buff. His muscles were tight and corded all through his body, but especially his ass and thighs. Josiah wasn't an ass man. Really, he wasn't an anything man, but getting an uninhibited view of Ray's ass gave him a newfound appreciation for tight asses and muscular thighs. "Fine," Josiah murmured as Ray bent forward and showed a peek of his tight hole. Josiah's hands fisted the sheets, pulling them closer to the center of his body, hiding his arousal under them. "You can open your packages today." "Yeah. I was going to get to it in a bit. I have a lot of videos to catch up on." "Your clothing try-on videos." Ray grabbed the towel again, jostling his cock and balls as the towel collected the moisture between his thighs. Josiah whimpered. "Why yeah, those." "Cool. I'll get breakfast cooked in a minute. We got the week's groceries delivered the other day. Really, it's so much easier than getting food delivered for every meal." He pulled a pair of drawstring basketball shorts over his ass, not bothering with boxers, and the thin fabric barely hid the outline of his cock. Death toll is still high, but cases are starting to slow. There's no real news on a cure, but pretty much everyone's in agreement with self-isolation and social distancing if you have to leave the house. "Cool?" Josiah glanced out of the window. "Sunny. Almost tauntingly so. You have any specific requests for breakfast? I could make something sweet if you wanted. Maybe pancakes?" "You can make whatever you'd like." Josiah sucked his bottom lip. "I may need some help with the filming. It'd go by a lot quicker anyway, if you helped me. Do you have time for it today?" "Yeah, sure. I can take the day off so you can get this done. Do you want to film the boyfriend one today, too?" Not sure. First, I have to see what all I received, then I'll make the decision." "Sounds good." Ray turned around, releasing his hair from the braid and letting it fall in waves around his square face. "Then I'll be in the kitchen." Josiah relaxed when Ray exited the room, rolling his eyes at his body's excitement before showering, brushing his growing afro and shaving his face. After shaving, he felt human again, less forgotten and ignored, and he picked at breakfast as he opened the boxes in order of size. There were 5 large boxes, 3 medium ones and 2 smaller ones, and it took most of the morning for Josiah to organize all the clothes. After everything was organized in piles around the living room, he disassembled the boxes and stacked them by the door. Then he paired clients with clothing and began formulating outfits and video ideas as Ray worked in the other room. The final step was finding the perfect filming spot, and he popped in and out of every room in the suite before deciding on his bedroom. It had the most natural light, the cleanest interior, and the perfect vibe. With his digital camera in hand, and the sleeves of his oversized sweatshirt pushed up to his elbows, he moved into the kitchen. "Ray?" "Yeah?" Ray tore his eyes away from the laptop, closing it as he regarded Josiah. "I'm ready to get the filming done. I think I'm going to start with something a little silly, like what I would have worn for a week on the beach. Do you think people will like it?" Josiah shrugged. "I think we all need a little escapism right now, and these are already things I had planned. It's not like I'm actually going anywhere, after all." "True, But is it a fruitless video when no one has a reason to buy beach clothes to sit at home? What if they wanted to sunbathe in their backyard, or recently purchased a pool? Josiah paused, thumbing the chevron-patterned camera strap. I know you think my job is stupid, but if I don't do these videos, I won't get paid, so please don't make me change my mind. Not trying to make you change your mind. I want you to do the videos, and I'm excited to film them with you, but we gotta find the angle here. Your selling point, because brands are going to be looking for the sell-through too. Yes, I know. This is much easier when there is no quarantine. Obviously. Ray smiled. I like your idea of acknowledging the situation. Let's go with it. So, I'm your camera guy. Ray approached Josiah, gingerly taking the camera from him and looping the neck strap over his head. You are, and do a good job please, because I'd hate to have to fire you and still see your face every day. Ray chuckled. I'll do what I can. Aha. Josiah led Ray to the bedroom, where he had already set out his clothes and set marks for both Ray and himself. He explained the settings on the camera and how the process worked before he stepped away from the other man and approached the side of the bed where he'd laid out a week's worth of outfits. Josiah fingered over the starched fabrics before he sucked in a deep breath and peeled his sweatshirt over his head. It had been the first time in weeks that he'd been bare-chested in front of Ray, and his skin prickled under Ray's gaze. He squirmed under it, finding no comfort in Ray's blatant interest. In fact, it had the opposite effect. His skin crawled and his taut stomach turned over, flipping and nodding until bile crept up his esophagus. He dropped his baggy sweatpants, trading it with a designer outfit. He had paired one designer's slim-fitted button-up shirts with another designer's chino slacks. Box-toed loafers completed the look, and he reviewed himself in the mirror. He adjusted his collar, picked a bit of lint from his slacks, and then glanced at Ray. I'm ready. All right. I'm starting the video then. Do you want me to turn it off when you change? Yeah, please. Josiah transformed as he moved to his mark. He set aside his exhaustion, his worries, his slow simmering depression, and he turned it on. A smile stretched across his face, and he jumped into the intro he had opened his videos with for the last several years. He was bubbly, and while watching the viewfinder, he stepped forwards and backwards as he talked about his outfit, accenting his words with casual laughter. He changed and did the same thing again. He explained the fit of the garments, and even offered his viewers a coupon code to the designer's online shops before closing his video with a heartfelt message and ending the recording himself. You come alive in front of the camera. Ray closed the viewfinder and set the camera on the dresser. I guess. It's a persona. I've been filming these videos for so long half of the things I say are etched in my brain, but I enjoy it. I mean, I wouldn't want any other job. I was talking about how you've been in a funk these past few days. You were more like yourself in front of the camera. Josiah peeled off the last outfit. It hadn't been much, just a pair of swim bottoms, a matching button-down shirt, and sandals. For the video, he had left the buttons unfastened, showing his chest and a shadowed peak of his dark nipples. I guess. You've been walking around here like it's winter with sweatshirts and pants on, and in front of the camera you're showing off every inch of your body. Is it a problem? Josiah lifted both of his eyebrows, shooting a sharp gaze towards Ray. Is there a problem with me showing my body to the people who watch my videos? It wasn't porn, and it wasn't vulgar, so if you expect me to cover up because we're fake dating, then this isn't going to work. I didn't say you can't do what you did. Good, because my filming format wasn't changing. Ray frowned. I'm trying to ask you if everything's okay. I know the last time we really had a chance to connect, you were anxious about touch. I'm fine now, Josiah offered Ray a placating smile. He wasn't fine. The thought of anyone's hands on him made his skin itch and crawl. At first, it had been the not knowing, perhaps maybe a germ thing considering the pandemic going on around them, but then it had morphed. He was the one who was dirty, unworthy of touch. Quentin had cheated, after all, because Josiah hadn't been enough for him. Okay, Ray drawled, extending his hand to Josiah, palm facing the ceiling. Come here then. Josiah glanced at his hand, then at his face, pressing his lips together. The muscles in his jaw jumped, and he smoothed the bedspread under his fingers. No. This is silly. I don't have to prove I am okay with touch. You don't, Ray agreed, letting his hand fall and taking long strides from the center of the room to the bed. He stopped next to Josiah, leaving the sparest bit of distance between their bodies, and Josiah's breath hitched. Can I touch you? The question was gentle and polite. Ray asked the way Quentin hadn't. He didn't feel obligated to Josiah's body or attention. He wasn't demanding. Josiah wet his lips. He wanted to say yes, but as his mind collected the sounds for the response, his skin crawled. The low level of nausea still brewing in his throat splashed into his mouth, and sweat collected on his brow. I can't, Josiah gasped. I'm sorry. I can't. He braced himself for Ray's response as his legs turned wobbly under him. Ray clenched his fists. I want to hold you, but, he sighed, I also want you to know I will never touch you without your permission, okay? Josiah whimpered, collapsing on the bed and covering his face with his hands. Okay, he mumbled amidst a wave of tears. Okay. Ray was quiet for a few seconds. It's late, so I'm going to go make dinner. He pulled away from Josiah, following a familiar traveled path towards the door, and as his fingers curled around the knob, Josiah pulled his hands from his face. Ray? Yeah? He paused. Josiah nibbled his thumb, prying off the nail and leaving a jagged edge before he tucked his hands between his thighs. Ray expected an answer, but he didn't have one, and he trembled as he looked into Ray's questioning features. And nothing, I guess. Okay. Frustration and concern were clear on Ray's face, but he didn't comment. Instead, he tipped his head in a bow. I'll be in the kitchen.